NEC Section 500.4 addresses the requirements for classifying locations and the need for documentation. This documentation must be provided by the fire code official or by engineers, architects, or other qualified persons approved by the authority having jurisdiction, abbreviated as AHJ. The owner or operator of the facility is responsible for providing the required documentation to the AHJ. The documentation should include specific information pertaining to the electrical installation in question. Firstly, the location of the receptacles, including the distance from any propane storage tanks or filling stations, must be documented. This is critical for determining the potential hazard level of the area. Secondly, the type and rating of the receptacles being used is required. This includes voltage, amperage, and any specific hazardous location ratings. Thirdly, the type of cords and plugs used to connect the block heaters to the receptacles must be specified. The cord and plug ratings must be appropriate for the environment and the load. Fourthly, the maximum load that will be connected to each receptacle is a key piece of information. This ensures that the receptacles and wiring are not overloaded. Fifthly, the precautions that will be taken to prevent damage to the cords or plugs must be outlined. This might include physical protection, strain relief, or other measures. Understanding the role of the authority having jurisdiction, or ODJ, is vital. The AHJ is the organization, office, or individual responsible for enforcing the requirements of a code or a standard, or for approving equipment, materials, and installation, or a procedure. In this context, the AHJ will review the documentation to ensure that the electrical installation meets the requirements of the NEC and any other applicable codes or standards. The NEC, or National Electrical Code, provides guidelines for electrical safety and helps to minimize the risk of fire and electric shock. Article 500 and subsequent articles cover hazardous locations, which are areas where fire or explosion hazards may exist due to flammable gases, vapors, dust, or fibers. The classification of these locations is based on the properties of the flammable substances and the likelihood that they will be present in ignitable concentration. The classes are Class I, Class Roman II, and Class Roman III. Class I locations involve flammable gases or vapors. Class Roman II locations pertain to combustible dusts. Class Roman III locations involve ignitable fibers or flames. Within each class, there are divisions that further categorize the level of hazard. Division 1 indicates that the hazard is normally present or may be present frequently. Division 2 indicates that the hazard is present only under abnormal conditions. In the situation described with propane tank trucks and propane storage, the location is likely to be a Class I location due to the presence of flammable propane gas. The division will depend on the likelihood of the propane being released into the atmosphere. Factors to consider when classifying the location include the ventilation, the potential for leaks, and the presence of any sources of ignition. Proper classification is crucial for selecting appropriate electrical equipment and wiring methods. Equipment used in hazardous locations must be specifically designed and tested to prevent ignition of the flammable substance. This equipment is typically explosion-proof or intrinsically safe. Explosion-proof equipment is designed to contain an explosion within the enclosure, preventing it from propagating to the surrounding atmosphere. Intrinsically safe equipment is designed to operate at low energy levels, preventing the creation of sparks or hot surfaces that could ignite the flammable substance. Wiring methods for hazardous locations must also be appropriate for the environment. Conduit systems must be sealed to prevent the migration of flammable gases or vapors. Cables must be specifically approved for use in hazardous locations. The documentation required by NEC Section 500.4 is intended to ensure that the electrical installation is safe and complies with all applicable codes and standards. It is the responsibility of the owner or operator of the facility to provide this documentation to the AHJ and to ensure that the installation is properly maintained. When choosing receptacles for block heaters in this environment, consider the following. Firstly, the receptacles must be rated for the voltage and amperage required by the block heaters. Secondly, the receptacles must be suitable for outdoor use and protected from the elements. Thirdly, if the location is classified as a hazardous location, the receptacles must be specifically approved for use in that type of environment. The distance of the receptacles from the propane storage tanks and filling station is a critical factor. The closer the receptacles are to these areas, the greater the likelihood that the location will be classified as a hazardous location. The NEC provides guidelines for determining the extent of hazardous locations around flammable substance storage and handling facilities. These guidelines take into account the properties of the flammable substance, the ventilation, and the potential for leaks. The type of cords and plugs used to connect the block heaters to the receptacles is also important. The cords must be suitable for outdoor use and resistant to abrasion, chemicals, and other environmental factors. The plugs must be compatible with the receptacles and provide a reliable connection. The maximum load that will be connected to each receptacle must be carefully considered. The receptacles and wiring must be sized to handle the load without overheating. It is also important to consider the potential for simultaneous operation of multiple block heaters. The precautions that will be taken to prevent damage to the cords or plugs should be clearly defined. This may include providing physical protection for the cords, such as conduit or cable trays. It may also include using strain relief devices to prevent stress in the connections. Regular inspections and maintenance are essential for ensuring the continued safety of the electrical installation. The receptacles, cords, and plugs should be inspected regularly for damage or wear. Any damaged or worn component should be replaced immediately. The documentation required by NEC Section 500.4 should be kept up to date and readily available for inspection by the AHJ. In summary, classifying locations for outdoor receptacles near propane storage requires careful consideration of the NEC and other applicable codes and standards. The documentation required by NEC Section 500.4 is essential for ensuring that the electrical installation is safe and complies with all applicable requirements. The owner or operator of the facility is responsible for providing this documentation to the AHJ and for ensuring that the installation is properly maintained. Remember that electrical work in hazardous locations should only be performed by qualified personnel who are familiar with the applicable codes and standards. Proper classification and installation are crucial for preventing fires and explosions. Furthermore, consulting with a qualified electrical engineer or inspector is highly recommended. They can provide expert guidance on classifying the location, selecting appropriate equipment, and ensuring compliance with all applicable requirements. The National Fire Protection Association, or NFPA, is a valuable resource for information on electrical safety in hazardous locations. The NFPA publishes the NEC and other codes and standards related to fire protection and electrical safety. The NEC is updated every 3 years to reflect the latest technological advancements and safety practices. Staying up to date with the latest edition of the NEC is essential for ensuring that electrical installations are safe and compliant. In addition to the NEC, other codes and standards may apply depending on the specific location and application. Local building codes, fire codes, and environmental regulations may also have requirements that must be met. It is important to be aware of all applicable codes and standards and to ensure that the electrical installation complies with all requirements. Careful planning and attention to detail are essential for ensuring the safety of electrical installations in hazardous locations. By following the guidelines of the NEC and consulting with qualified professionals, you can minimize the risk of fire and explosion and protect people and property. The process of classifying a location involves several steps. Firstly, identify the flammable substances that are present in the area. Secondly, determine the likelihood that these substances will be present in ignitable concentrations. Thirdly, consider the ventilation and other factors that may affect the concentration of the flammable substances. Fourthly, consult the NEC and other applicable codes and standards to determine the appropriate classification for the location. Fifthly, document the classification and the basis for the classification. The documentation should include a detailed description of the location, the flammable substances present, the ventilation, and any other relevant factors. The documentation should also include a list of the codes and standards that were used to determine the classification. The authority having jurisdiction, or ARJ, will review the documentation to ensure that the classification is appropriate. The AHA may also conduct inspections to verify that the electrical installation complies with all applicable requirements. If the AHA determines that the classification is not appropriate, they may require changes to the electrical installation. It is important to work closely with the AHA to ensure that the electrical installation is safe and compliant. Proper maintenance of electrical equipment in hazardous locations is also crucial. Regular inspections should be conducted to identify any signs of damage or wear. Any damaged or worn equipment should be repaired or replaced immediately. Electrical equipment should be kept clean and free of dust and debris. Ventilation systems should be maintained to ensure that they are functioning properly. All electrical work in hazardous locations should be performed by qualified personnel who are familiar with the applicable codes and standards. The use of non-approved equipment or improper installation methods can create a significant risk of fire or explosion. In addition to the technical requirements of the NEC, it is also important to consider human factors. Training should be provided to employees who work in or around hazardous locations. The training should cover the hazards of the location, the proper use of electrical equipment, and emergency procedures. Warning signs should be posted to alert personnel to the presence of hazardous materials. Emergency shut-off switches should be readily accessible in case of a fire or explosion. By addressing both the technical and human factors, you can create a safer work environment and reduce the risk of accidents. The classification of locations for propane truck block heater receptacles is a complex process that requires careful consideration of the NEC and other applicable codes and standards. It is important to work closely with qualified professionals and the authority having jurisdiction to ensure that the electrical installation is safe and compliant. Remember that safety is always the top priority when working with hazardous materials. The NEC contains tables and figures that can assist in determining the extent of classified areas around propane tanks and dispensing equipment. These resources should be consulted to ensure accurate classification. The use of gas detectors can also be beneficial in monitoring the concentration of propane in the air. Gas detectors can provide early warning of leaks and help to prevent the accumulation of flammable concentrations. The detectors should be properly calibrated and maintained to ensure their accuracy. The location of the detectors should be carefully selected to provide the best coverage. In some cases, it may be necessary to use multiple detectors to monitor the entire area. The information provided on the nameplates of electrical equipment is crucial for ensuring proper selection and installation. The nameplate will typically indicate the voltage, amperage, horsepower, and other important ratings of the equipment. It will also indicate whether the equipment is approved for use in hazardous locations. Always verify that the equipment is suitable for the intended application before installation. The use of extension cords in hazardous locations should be avoided whenever possible. Extension cords can be easily damaged and can create a tripping hazard. If extension cords must be used, they should be heavy-duty and approved for use in hazardous locations. The cord should be inspected regularly for damage. Permanent wiring should be installed whenever possible to eliminate the need for extension cords. Grounding and bonding are essential for electrical safety. Grounding provides a path for fault current to flow back to the source, tripping a circuit breaker or fuse and preventing electric shock. Bonding ensures that all metal parts of the electrical system are at the same potential, reducing the risk of electric shock. Grounding and bonding should be installed in accordance with the NEC. The use of surge protection devices can help to protect electrical equipment from damage caused by voltage surges. Voltage surges can be caused by lightning strikes, power outages, or other events. Surge protection devices should be installed at the service entrance and at individual equipment locations. Regular inspections of the electrical system should be conducted by qualified personnel. The inspection should include a visual examination of all wiring, equipment, and connections. The inspection should also include testing of grounding, bonding, and surge protection systems. Any deficiencies should be corrected immediately. The documentation required by NEC Section 500.4 should be reviewed and updated regularly. The documentation should reflect any changes to the electrical system or the surrounding environment. The documentation should be readily available for inspection by the authority having jurisdiction. Proper planning, installation, and maintenance of electrical systems in hazardous locations are essential for preventing fires, explosions, and electric shock. Always follow the guidelines of the NEC and consult with qualified professionals to ensure the safety of your electrical installation. The specific requirements for electrical installations in hazardous locations can vary depending on the type of hazardous material present, the likelihood of the material being present in ignitable concentrations, and the specific characteristics of the location. It is important to carefully evaluate all of these factors when designing and installing electrical systems in hazardous locations. The use of checklists can be helpful in ensuring that all of the necessary steps are taken. The checklist should include items such as verifying the classification of the location, selecting appropriate equipment, installing wiring in accordance with the NEC, grounding and bonding the system, and providing training to employees. The checklist should be reviewed and updated regularly. Communication and coordination are essential for ensuring the safety of electrical installations in hazardous locations. All personnel involved in the design, installation, and maintenance of the electrical system should be aware of the hazards and the safety precautions that must be taken. Regular meetings should be held to discuss safety issues and to coordinate work activities. Emergency plans should be developed and implemented to address potential fires, explosions, and electric shock incidents. The emergency plan should include procedures for evacuating the area, shutting down equipment, and contacting emergency services. Drills should be conducted regularly to ensure that personnel are familiar with the emergency plans. The use of personal protective equipment, or PPE, is essential for protecting workers from electrical hazards. PPE includes items such as safety glasses, gloves, and insulated tools. The type of PPE required will depend on the specific hazards present. Workers should be trained on the proper use of PPE. The location and design of the block heater receptacle should consider the potential for damage from vehicles or equipment. Protective barriers or bollards may be necessary to prevent damage. The receptacle should be located in a well-lit area to improve visibility. The receptacle should be easily accessible for plugging in and unplugging block heaters. The receptacle should be clearly labeled to indicate the voltage and amperage. The use of GFCI protection is recommended for all outdoor receptacles. GFCI protection can help to prevent electric shock. The GFCI device should be tested regularly to ensure that it is functioning properly. The location should also be assessed for potential environmental factors such as water accumulation or extreme temperatures which could affect the performance and safety of the electrical equipment. Measures should be taken to mitigate these factors, such as providing adequate drainage or using equipment rated for extreme temperatures.